Well, let me start with one point, and I think that what we've learned from Helen Timperley and also from our own experience and from on-the-ground work in BC is that we're facing really complex challenges right now when we think about equity, when we think about every learner crossing the stage, when we think about addressing the needs of our underserved kids. These are huge challenges. And Helen's argument, which we really accept, is that complex challenges requires us to develop adaptive expertise, both as principals and as teachers, and as educators, period. And the only way we can develop that kind of expertise is through collaborative inquiry. So for us, the notion of the complexity of our job, the fact that we need to develop expertise that we don't already have, and that the only way we can do that together, I think, is a trend that we're seeing really impacts our work.
I agree with that.
Oh, thank heavens.
What a relief. I also think that there's some things that are really big, not just in education, but in the world right now. One is the democracies. Making sure that we're developing citizens who know how to operate in a democratic system. I think it has huge implications for leadership, and I think the smarter countries are taking that seriously. Really want to do a shout out for the work in Finland, where they seem to have a really strong program K-12 for young people to check out fake news, and to me that's just admirable. They come way up on the ethical scale because they know how to do that. That means their teachers know how to do it and their leaders know how to do it. And I think the other thing, this is a big global trend. I mean, I didn't even want to read the article this morning about what's happening in the oceans, but sustainability, we're on our way to Australia. People have been living in this fire for quite some time, and I think it's captured the world's imagination, sort of for better or worse. So we're hearing trends like eco-anxiety with kids and teachers and schools and staffs. So well-being, yes, but well-being for nature and the planet. And I think I would love to be able to document in BC, and maybe the leadership group of the principals is a good one to do this. On Twitter, you see a lot of people doing nature schools, the walking curriculum, lots of people building a whole outdoor classrooms. I think there's a whole lot more nature leadership in BC than we know of, but I'd love to see how we could build it. And I think looking ahead for maybe a year from now, the network will make that the nature of learning and learning in nature a theme. But I think that is a trend that the smarter places are really trying to build into their work one way or the other.
Yeah, so I think the challenges of social media and how do we help kids navigate in that world, connected to well-being and anxiety, is a huge issue for us to learn from. There's some interesting work in a BC school where the senior students are saying adults can't teach that to young people, we have to do it. And whether that's true or not, but they're taking that on as a challenge, that it's their responsibility to help the younger kids in the high school navigate effectively in social media. So the Finnish work, I totally agree. I think another issue is, what are the measures that really matter? So we have our traditional measures, but when we're looking at issues of well-being, of media literacy, of critical thinking, of collaborative skills, do we have the measures that are simple enough that give us as leaders an indication of where our kids are? So I think that's and there's lots of conversations going on right now about what are those measures. And it's interesting that next year the PISA assessment is going to be on critical thinking. So we I think locally we really need to be thinking about that.
Well, creative thinking as well. And I think, just on the critical thinking, to give a shout out to the BC work on decision making, because I think now that young people are taking such a lead on the sustainability issue, hallelujah, thank you, young people, the rest of us are trying to come behind and support, and I think the decision-making moves that have been created in the new playbook by BC educators with decision scientists are really going to help us. I think they're also going to help us on the democratic problem solving. They're also going to help us. I think people have stopped talking so much. I hope they have. Anyway, we'll see when we go to our next couple of places. But student voice seems to be dropping, and people are talking about learner agency youth agency. I think it's much more how can we actually work together in collaborative and powerful ways to do some new, more nature-enhancing things. And I do want to do a call out to that one VP. We happen to know her through our graduate program, but she's working with a student leadership group using both the spirals framework so that they're scanning to see what the issues are for young people in the building, and then the decision framework, she's using that to help those young people figure out what strategies to use to help them. And so those kids are addressing racism, they're addressing grade 8 online harassment. They're just doing some really, really smart things. I'd love to see that work grow. So I think there's nowhere we go where people say, oh, it's not an issue around social media, lack of sleep, anxiety, depression, whether it's adults or young people. And I think we have to figure that out. I think nature leadership, ecosystems, networks, those kinds of things are on everybody's lips these days.
I think another trend that we're seeing is around, and it's connected to anxiety, but it's around the appropriate, intelligent application of growth mindset and building resilience in learners. And we're seeing some really, really smart work in different places, but all addressing the things. How can we help kids, both individually and as teams, develop the kind of resilience they need to address the challenges that they're facing? So it's, I think it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I want to do a shout out to Joe Bowler's new book. I just finished it. I meant to bring it and wave it for the camera, but it's a fantastic book. And he was saying that there was some, a minority group in the States, they were doing math at college level and they weren't doing well. And another minority group was doing extremely well. And when they studied why one was doing well and one wasn't, it was that the group that was doing well, they'd formed themselves into teams and they were studying together. Whereas the other kids, and they came from an equity group background, they thought their job was to sit in their dorms and slog away at math. When they taught them how to work together, everything changed for the better. I think that's fantastic.
And that'll be sort of the final point that I'd make in terms of trends. It's principals working together. So we're seeing some of the most effective work where there are groups of principals in clusters of 3 that are developing their professional learning together, that are sharing resources, that are tackling issues together. So I think a really important trend is moving from isolation to interdependence and from competition to networks. And the places that are most quickly making gains for learners, that's what we see as one of the key components of that.
Yeah. Maybe I could just come behind that and say that I think there's a power, an emerging theme, because we were at ICSI in Marrakesh recently, of networks figuring out the rich connections between those amongst those 3 schools, so that you could actually see who was linked to who, and whether you really had a network or if you just had 3 people working together. There's quite a difference, and I think we now have the intellectual knowledge to figure out how to do that, which is exciting.
And most recently, some of the research on principal leadership says that the next competency for principals is going to be vulnerability. So to be able to say, I don't know, I need some help, and let's figure this out together. And that the appropriate expressions of vulnerability can really build trust within a school and change the whole tenor in the school.
Which is why the trio is good.